Hey there, I am Oz Du Soleil, and I'm glad to be part of this event and sharing with you more Power Query. You might know me from the YouTube channel Excel on Fire, and also I am the co-author of this book, Guerrilla Data Analysis #3. Bill Jelen and I co-wrote this book, and there's some really good stuff in it. So Power Query today, specifically when we go into the Power Query editor, and over in that left panel, you can see there's an option for duplicate a query or reference a query. What are those? Well, they're really handy. So here's our data. We have March data. We've got the one column for contractors and hours, and then another column for location. So we can see Horatio worked 3 hours at 8th Avenue. All right, and there are duplicates in case somebody did go to a location more than once, like Vineet, 5 hours twice at 8th Avenue. And then let's scroll down. There's Southeast Hazel, Moon Coast, Parkwood, Ziven Street, lots of data. Okay, and then we have the contractors, the list of contractors, their IDs, and then they're in different groups. So Belinda is in group 22, Endora's group 14, and Jody is group 5. Their pay is $35 an hour, but if they work at one of the arcades, they get paid time and a half, 1.5. And to be specific, let's look at this. We've got Arcade 19, 2031, and then Arcadia Mill. That is not an arcade. So that's got to be paid attention to, right? Okay. So over in queries and connections, you can see that I have queries for pay rate, arcades, and contractors. Let's get into it. Highlight, rephrase. I'm going to put my cursor in the data set. Right click, get data from table/range. So I'm bringing this data in. Let me boost it up for the people who don't have their glasses on. The first thing we need to do, no matter what, is fill in these holes in the location column. So I'm going to highlight that, right click, fill down. Good. Next, we got to split the hours from the contractor's name. So I'm going to go to this column, split column by delimiter, and then split it at the colon at each occurrence. There's only one each, so let's go on with it. Good. And then let's look at these data types. So yes, this is text. This is decimal. Yep. And then here is a text again. All right, and notice that this query's name is March hours. I named the table that when I made it. So yeah, the query's name is March hours, and we've got everything all split out. And there's so much that we can do with this data between the various data types. So many different questions we can get at. Besides, how much should each person be paid for the month? We can get a report of hours by person, no matter the location, hours by location, no matter the contractor, anybody who's worked 25 hours or less or 25 hours or more during the month. So many things we can get from this, and that is how replicating and duplicating queries can help. Now, I'm about to reference a query because no matter what we wanted to do with this data, we had to close the gaps in the location, and we had to split out the contractors' names from the hours. And in fact, I need to go ahead and do this. I need to call this contractors. Okay, and okay, enter. And notice we got to rename column step there. And then I'm gonna go over here and then do this. Okay, boom. Now, I can do so much with this data. But whatever I did, I would have to add it, I would have to do these first few steps. So now this is where I'm going to do my first referencing of a query. Okay. Go to March hours, right click, and reference the query. So now notice the source. Up in the formula bar, the source says equals March hours. Right? So all of these steps, we'll go over here and look. Okay, all of these steps are in March hours, but over here, we've got a source March hours. Now, what do we want to do? First, we want to report for just the arcades. So I am going to go here and do a text filter for text that contains. Okay, keep rows where location contains are. Well, actually, let's do begins with arcade. All right, and that'll make sure that we don't also get Arcadia Mill. Okay. And then I can call this March Arcades. Good. So let's look at what's happening. Let's go to query dependencies. So we've got the current workbook, the pay rate, arcades, and contractors queries. And now we have March hours query, and then March arcades query is flowing out of March arcades. So now let's do this. I want to go back to March arcades or March hours, and then I'm going to right click and duplicate because I just want to see something right now. Okay, but I don't want to mess up anything that I've done. All right, but let's look at the query dependencies. Now, in this current workbook, we have a whole separate query called March hours 2 because it was duplicated. It is not flowing out of another query. So I'm going to close that. And then what I want to do is I'm just curious right now. I just want to do a general pivot to kind of look ahead. So the data I want up top, I have to highlight that in order to pivot. So now I'm going to go to transform and pivot column, and the values column should have hours in it, and okay. So now I just want to take a peek at what's happening. Maybe Belinda was curious about her total hours. So there was 4.5 at 8th Avenue, 8.5 at Arcade 20, 4.5 at Moon Coast. Okay, so we can just take a peek here, and then we can even, filter out some things and just look at, say, Belinda, Endora, Grover, and Gus, and okay. All right. Okay, so I do this kind of thing a lot, and it helps me to duplicate the query because I can just take a peek at this data and then go ahead and get rid of it. Sometimes I might even test something or try to do something that I'm not sure is going to work. I can duplicate the query and figure out, fiddle around, play around, and then delete it if it doesn't work. But duplicating the query helps a lot with that. So I'm going to delete this query because I didn't need it. I saw what I needed to see, and now I'm back to work. All right, so now I have the arcade data. I'm just taking a look at it. All right, so what I am going to do is I'm going to go to home and group by the contractor. All right, add a group and then by the location, and then sum the hours. Okay. Okay. So next, I need to get a report of the locations that are not arcades. Go here, right click, reference. Okay, we'll go here, March non-arcade. Now I'm going to filter out. Okay. Text filters does not begin with arcade. Okay. Good. So now we have Arcadia Mill and we don't have any arcades in here. All right. So now let's look at the query dependencies. See, gosh, let me zoom this in. All right. So this is showing us out of the current workbook, we have the query March hours, and now we have two queries that flow out of that one query. All right. Now let's do a group by. Okay. I'm going to go home and then group by. I want to group by, okay, advanced. Okay, I want the contractors, add a group in now by the location, and then a sum of the hours, and then call this total. Okay, so now we have a report by the hours. Good. So now let's go forward with this. I am going to go back to March hours and then right click and reference. And then I'm going to group by the contractors and the hours. I'm in the home tab, group by the contractors, and then to get a sum of the hours. Okay. Next, I'm going to go to the pay rate. There's that one, and I'm going to drill down. Good. So now I have a 35. Okay. And then for arcades, I'm going to right click here and then drill down. Good. All right. So now I'm going to calculate the pay. Going to add a column, custom column, pay. All right, equals the count. All right, and then times the pay rate. Double click that. All right, good. There we go. And then change this data type to currency. We can even go over here and go to home and then sort this. So now we have this query where we know how much to pay people for the non-arcade work that they did. So March, change the name of it, March non-arcade pay. All right, so there is that query. All right, so let's close and load. We'll boost this up. Okay, so now we've got a lot of queries. Here's the March non-arcade pay. Here is the March non-arcade, the contractors by location and the total hours. The arcade data, boost that up. March hours. All right. And then we are back to our original data. So there's so much that we can do here. And let me point out something. When we do references, here is one reason to do a reference. Supposing you had 2 queries and you do steps 1 through 4, and then 4 is your desired result. But you also need another result that, continues on from step 4. And that's what we saw when I brought the data in and split it out. Okay. Now with all those different reports from that data that I want, I don't need to go do all of those steps again. Everything needed to have the holes filled in and have the hours split from the names, no matter what we did. All right. So then everything, separating the arcade, non-arcade, calculating the pay, everything can flow from that step, so that now if there is a change in the data, we have one place to make a change. So if I go back here and then I add some data, and all right, I just added more hours to Royal. Okay, so let's go to March non-arcade pay, boost this up. All right, and so now I'm going to go to data and refresh. So everything updates, everything. Going through, following the path through all of the different queries. If we duplicate a query, so let's do that. I'm going to go to, let's go to March hours, double click it. All right, so now I am going to duplicate this query. Now this one has 83 rows of data, and I'm going to close and load this. So there it is, March hours 2. So now let's say that in our source data, I'm going to make a change to it in the March. I'm going to call this Royal Blue, enter, and then, okay, let's look at data, and then I'm going to refresh. All right, so let's see, March non-arcade, this has a Royal Blue, Oh, let me see. Now, see, this is another one where I would edit this out. Right, because I changed it in the source data. That's what I did. I changed it in the source data, so it makes sense that with it duplicated. So I'm gonna delete that, and let's see. Just trying to think about where I want to back up to, and then not even deal with this. Okay. I'm going to change this back to Royal. So I've said that there is a lot that we can do, and you've seen the duplicate and the reference. And now let me show you one other thing. I have this table here with April data. Okay, and the table's name is April hours. So I am going to go to the March hours query. And I am going to go here and right click and duplicate it. Now I'm going to call this April hours and go to source and point it to my table that's called April hours. And when I hit this, it had better change. All right, enter. Look at that. So now we have the April hours that we're pulling in. Okay, and I didn't have to go all the way back out into Excel. I didn't have to redo these steps again. And then let's look at the query dependencies. Let's boost it up. Now you see we've got March hours, which has March arcades coming out of it. Also coming out of it is March non-arcades. And we combined pay rate and rephrase. And then we used both the pay rate data and the March hours data to get the March non-arcade pay. So now out of this current workbook, by that simple step, now we have April hours as its own query. And all we did was duplicate March and change the source name. Simple. Cool way to duplicate a query. And it brought in the fill down, the split column, the rename columns, and we can get going, right? So what we can do is go over here. All right. Here is March arcades. There's the source called March hours. I'm going to right click, duplicate the query, go to the source, change the source to April hours, and then call this April arcades. Enter. So now watch this. Even though I duplicated a query to get here, this is actually being referenced. It is referencing the April hours query. All right, so everything is hanging together. We could continue on and on with this. And I'm not going to go through and answer a whole lot of questions, like get to total pay and whatnot, because the point was to show you the difference between referencing a query and duplicating a query. And I showed you several ways of doing this. And I hope that it was helpful to you. Hopefully you got some insight from it. I did do a video on my YouTube channel, Excel on Fire, about duplicating and referencing queries. And yeah. So use them if you're not already.